Commander Hyun-woo stepped out of the biomimicry chamber and looked at his new human hands. They were soft and weak compared to his real claws, but they would help him blend in perfectly. His mission was simple: spend 6 months on Earth, watch the humans, and write a report about how dangerous they might be to the galactic hegemony. The answer seemed obvious. Humans were not dangerous at all. Their technology was hundreds of years behind the hegemony. Their weapons were primitive. Their space travel was limited to their own moon and a few nearby planets. The hegemony had conquered species far more advanced than these humans. Hyun-woo took the identity of David Kim, a researcher visiting from Seoul. He had studied human languages and customs for months. He knew how to act like them, how to speak like them, and how to think like them. At least he thought he did. His first day on Earth confused him completely. He was walking to his assigned research facility when he saw a woman stop her car in the middle of traffic. Rain was pouring down, and an old man was struggling to change his tire on the side of the road. The woman got out of her car, got completely soaked, and helped the stranger fix his tire. She did not ask for money. She did not ask for anything. When the man tried to thank her, she just smiled and drove away. Hyun-woo stood there in the rain watching this interaction with complete bewilderment. In hegemony society, helping a stranger served no purpose. It wasted time and resources. It made no logical sense. Maybe this was just one strange human, he thought. But everywhere he looked, he saw more of the same behavior. At a coffee shop, he watched a young man named Min-ho buy an extra sandwich every morning. Instead of eating it, Min-ho would go outside and give it to a homeless woman who sat near the building. The woman had nothing to offer in return, but Min-ho fed her every single day. At the research facility, his colleague Ji-eun worked late, every night, not because she was paid extra, but because she was trying to develop cleaner energy sources. When Hyun-woo asked her why she cared so much about a project that might not succeed for decades, she looked at him strangely. "Because people in the future will need clean air to breathe," she said, as if this was the most obvious thing in the world. Hyun-woo began documenting these behaviors in his daily reports. Every incident seemed to show the same pattern. Humans, helping other humans for no logical reason. They gave away their time, their money, and their energy to people who could never repay them. The most disturbing incident happened during his 3rd week on Earth. He was walking through a residential neighborhood when he heard screaming. A small child had been playing in the street when a heavy construction beam fell from a building site. The beam had trapped the child's leg, and the boy was crying in pain. The child's mother, a woman named So Young, arrived at the scene before the emergency workers. She was small, maybe 50 kilograms at most. The beam weighed at least 2 tons. Any rational being would wait for proper equipment and trained personnel. So Young did not wait. Hyun-woo watched in shock as this tiny human woman grabbed the massive beam and lifted it off her child. Her muscles should not have been capable of such strength. Her bones should have broken under the strain. But somehow, she moved that beam and pulled her son to safety. When the emergency workers arrived, So Young collapsed from exhaustion. The doctors later said she had torn several muscles and damaged her spine. She would need months of recovery, but when they asked her about it, she just said she did what any mother would do. That night, Hyun-woo wrote his most detailed report yet. He described the incident with So Young, the daily kindness of Min-ho, and the tireless work of Ji-eun. He tried to explain to his commanders that these humans displayed abilities that went beyond their normal biological limits. But how could he make them understand? In hegemony society, individuals survived by being strong and smart. The weak were left behind. Resources went to those who could contribute most to the empire. Personal sacrifice for strangers was not just rare, it was considered a mental illness. Yet here on Earth, this mental illness seemed to be everywhere. Hyun-woo sent his preliminary report with a simple conclusion. Humans display severe psychological instability. They regularly act against their own self-interest. However, this behavior appears to make them physically and emotionally stronger rather than weaker. Recommend continued observation. The response from Hegemony Command was brief. Report filed under low priority surveillance. Continue monitoring for actual threats. As Hyunwoo prepared for bed in his small human apartment, he wondered if his commanders were making a mistake. These humans were weak individually, but something about their strange behavior made them stronger as a group. He had 3 more months to figure out what that something was. 3 more months to understand why humans chose to help each other instead of conquering each other. 3 more months to write a report that no one would believe. 3 months into his mission, Hyunwoo thought he understood humans better. He was wrong. Every day brought new mysteries that made less sense than the day before. He had started keeping detailed notes about human behavior, thinking he could find patterns that explained their strange actions. Instead, his notebook filled with incidents that defied all logic. The first major event happened during his 4th month on Earth. A massive earthquake struck a country on the other side of the planet. Hyunwoo expected humans to focus on their own problems and ignore distant suffering. That was how rational species behaved. Instead, he watched his colleague Yoon-ji immediately stop all her research work. She spent 18 hours a day coordinating relief efforts for people she had never met and would never see. She organized food shipments, medical supplies, and rescue teams. She worked until she collapsed from exhaustion, then woke up and worked more. "Why do you care so much about strangers?" Hyunwoo asked her one evening, as she made phone calls to hospitals in the earthquake zone. Yoon-ji paused and looked at him, with confusion. "They are people," she said simply. "People are hurt. How can I not care?" This response troubled Hyunwoo deeply. In hegemony society, you helped your own family, your own clan, maybe your own planet if resources allowed. But spending your own time and money to help complete strangers on the other side of the world made no evolutionary sense. Yet everywhere he looked, humans were doing exactly that. He documented a construction worker named Jin-soo, who donated half his salary every month to build schools in poor countries. Jin-soo lived in a tiny apartment and ate simple food so that children he would never meet could learn to read. He recorded the story of Dr. Yoon-hee, who spent her vacation time traveling to remote villages to provide free medical care. She paid for her own transportation and supplies. The villagers had nothing to give her in return except their gratitude. But the most disturbing observations came when Hyunwoo began studying human history. He expected to find the usual patterns of conquest and domination that marked all intelligent species. The strong would destroy the weak, expand their territory, and build empires. This was the natural order of things. Human history was different. Yes, humans fought wars. Yes, they conquered and destroyed. But they also did something else, something that made no sense to Hyunwoo. They felt guilty about it afterward. They created rules to prevent future wars. They built monuments to remember their victims, not just their victories. More strange, they often helped their former enemies recover after defeating them. Hyunwoo found records of humans rebuilding the countries they had just destroyed. They fed the people they had just conquered. They turned their greatest enemies into their closest allies within a generation. This pattern repeated throughout human history. They fought each other, then helped each other, then became friends. It was like watching children play a game where the rules changed every few minutes. The most puzzling example involved their treatment of animals. Humans had domesticated wolves thousands of years ago, but instead of simply using them as tools, humans had turned wolves into companions. They fed these animals, played with them, and even mourned when they died. Hyunwoo watched his human neighbor Sang-min spend hundreds of dollars on medical treatment for his old dog. The dog was dying anyway and served no useful purpose anymore. Any rational being would have put the animal out of its misery and gotten a younger, healthier replacement. Instead, Sang-min sat with his dog every night, talking to it softly and making sure it was comfortable. When the dog finally died, Sang-min cried like he had lost a family member. "It was just an animal," Hyunwoo said, trying to understand. Sang-min looked at him with surprise and anger. "He was my friend for 12 years. He never asked for anything, except food and love. How can you call that just an animal?" These observations forced Hyunwoo to reconsider his original assessment. Humans were not simply psychologically unstable. They were operating according to completely different rules than any species the hegemony had ever encountered. They seemed to grow stronger through helping others. They formed emotional bonds with everything around them, from other humans to animals to ideas. These bonds did not weaken them, as logic suggested they should. Instead, the bonds created networks of mutual support that made entire human communities more resilient. Hyun-woo began testing this theory by observing human responses to crisis situations. When a local factory caught fire, he watched the entire neighborhood respond within minutes. People he knew barely spoke to each other suddenly worked together like a trained military unit. They formed rescue chains, provided medical care, and offered shelter to displaced workers. No one was in charge, but everyone knew what to do when a child went missing in the local park. Hundreds of strangers joined the search. They used their own time, their own resources, and their own energy to look for someone else's child. They searched through the night with flashlights and called out the child's name until their voices were hoarse. The child was found safe the next morning, sleeping under a bush where he had gotten lost. But Hyun-woo realized something important. If this had been a hegemony colony, maybe 5 or 6 people would have helped search. Here on Earth, the entire community had responded. His second classified report was much longer and more urgent than his first. Human beings, he wrote, did not follow normal biological programming. They had somehow evolved beyond simple survival instincts into something the hegemony had never seen before. They were dangerous, but not in any way his commanders would understand. Hyun-woo's final month on Earth changed everything he thought he knew about intelligent life. What he discovered during those 30 days would haunt him for the rest of his existence. It started with a funeral. Dr. Dong-min, a scientist at the research facility, had died suddenly from a heart attack. He was only 45 years old and had been working on a cure for a rare children's disease. The disease only affected about 1,000 children worldwide, so there was no profit in finding a cure. Big pharmaceutical companies ignored it completely. Dong-min had spent 15 years of his life working on this project anyway. He used his own money for research. He worked nights and weekends without pay. He never married or had children because he was too busy trying to save other people's children. At his funeral, Hyun-woo expected to see a small gathering of family and colleagues. Instead, he found hundreds of people. Many of them were families he had never seen before. Parents held photos of their sick children. Some children were there too, small and weak but alive. Dr. Dong-min saved my daughter's life, one father told Hyun-woo. He spent 3 years developing her treatment. He never asked for anything in return. After the funeral, something remarkable happened. Dong-min's research team announced they would continue his work. They would use their own time and money to finish what he had started. Within a week, donations began pouring in from around the world. People who had never heard of Dong-min sent money to complete his research. Why? Hyun-woo asked Dr. Ye-jin, who was now leading the project. Why do you care about a disease that will never affect you? Ye-jin looked at him with the same confused expression he had seen so many times. Because children are dying, she said. If we can stop that, we have to try. This attitude was everywhere. Hyun-woo found teachers like Ms. Hae-won who spent their own money buying supplies for poor students. He met firefighter Park Jun-ho, who had rescued dozens of people from burning buildings and never considered it heroic. It's just my job, Jun-ho said when people thanked him. But the most disturbing discovery came when Hyun-woo began studying how humans dealt with their greatest failures. Every species in the galaxy had dark periods in their history. The difference was what they did afterward. Most species buried their shame and pretended it never happened. Others celebrated their victories and forgot their victims. Humans did something else entirely. They remembered everything, especially the things they wished they could forget. Hyun-woo visited museums dedicated to human wars and atrocities. Instead of glorifying their victories, these museums focused on the suffering they had caused. Children learned about the mistakes of their ancestors, not to feel proud, but to feel responsible for never repeating them. We must remember, explained museum guide Kim Seo-jun, so that we never let this happen again. This pattern extended to everything humans touched. They had turned their worst disasters into their greatest strengths. When diseases killed millions, they built better hospitals. When wars destroyed cities, they created international laws to prevent future wars. When they polluted their environment, they developed cleaner technologies. Most remarkably, they had learned to turn their enemies into allies. Hyunwoo studied the history between countries that had fought bitter wars just decades earlier. Now, they were trading partners and friends. Former enemies worked together on scientific projects, shared resources during disasters, and had even formed military alliances to protect each other. How is this possible? He wondered aloud to his human friend Chang Ho, a history professor. Chang Ho smiled. We learned that having enemies is expensive and exhausting. Having friends is much better for everyone. This was not just philosophy. Hyunwoo observed it happening in real time. When tensions rose between two human nations over trade disputes, instead of preparing for war, they sent diplomats to find solutions. They compromised. They found ways for both sides to benefit. In hegemony space, such disputes would have led to conquest or destruction. The stronger would dominate the weaker, end of story. But humans seemed to prefer solutions where everyone won something. The most terrifying realization came during his final week on Earth. Hyunwoo was watching the news when he saw a report about space exploration. Humans had just launched another mission to Mars, not to claim territory or extract resources, but to search for signs of life. If they found life, even microscopic life, they planned to protect it. What if you find intelligent aliens? The news reporter asked the mission commander. Then we'll try to make friends with them, the commander replied without hesitation. Hyunwoo felt a chill run down his spine. Here was a species that automatically assumed the best about strangers. They planned to greet alien life with friendship instead of weapons. They would probably offer to share their technology and resources before anyone even asked. This was not naivety. This was a fundamental difference in how humans approached the universe. They saw potential friends everywhere, instead of potential threats. His final report was marked Urgent, Class Omega Threat, and sent directly to Hegemony High Command. Humanity represents the greatest danger the hegemony has ever faced, he wrote. Not because they are strong, but because they are contagious. Their ideas about cooperation and mutual aid spread to every species they encounter. They do not conquer enemies. They convert them into allies through acts of kindness and mutual benefit. Under no circumstances should direct contact be attempted. 3 days later, Hyunwoo received orders to return home immediately for psychological evaluation. His report was classified and buried in the archives. As his transport ship left Earth's atmosphere, Hyunwoo looked back at the blue planet and whispered a prayer to gods he hoped were listening. He had tried to warn them. It was already too late. 2 years after Hyunwoo returned from Earth, the Hegemony High Command decided to make official first contact with humanity. They had reviewed his reports and dismissed them as the paranoid thoughts of an agent who had spent too much time among aliens. Admiral Tae-hyun was chosen to lead the first contact mission. He was experienced and had successfully negotiated the surrender of 47 different species. The process was always the same. Arrive with overwhelming force, demand submission, offer protection in exchange for resources and obedience. It had never failed. Taehyun brought 300 ships to Earth's solar system. This was more firepower than most species had ever seen in one place. The message was clear. Resistance was impossible. Cooperation was the only logical choice. The human response surprised everyone. Instead of panic or immediate surrender, Earth sent a single small ship to meet the hegemony fleet. The ship contained only 3 people: President Chang Min, Ambassador Su Jin, and a translator named Dr. Ki-hoon. They were not afraid. They were curious. "Welcome to our solar system," President Chang Min said during the first meeting aboard Admiral Tae-hyun's flagship. "We have been hoping to meet our neighbors among the stars. We have so many questions about your civilization." Admiral Tae-hyun was confused. Where were the demands for mercy? Where were the pleas for their planet's survival? These humans acted like they were meeting friends at a dinner party. "You misunderstand the situation," Admiral Tae-hyun said firmly. "We are not here for conversation. The Galactic Hegemony offers you protection and membership in our alliance. In exchange, you will provide resources and follow our guidance. This is not a negotiation. Ambassador Sujin smiled politely. We appreciate the offer, but we would prefer to discuss a partnership between equals. We believe cooperation works better than domination. The translator, Dr. Kai-hoon, leaned forward with genuine interest. Could you tell us about your government structure? How do you make decisions that affect so many different species? We are always looking for ways to improve our own democratic processes. Admiral Tae-hyun stared at them in disbelief. These creatures were actually asking for advice on how to govern themselves better. They wanted to learn from the hegemony while refusing to submit to it. Democracy is inefficient, he explained. The hegemony provides order and stability. Individual planets focus on production and obedience. This system has worked for thousands of years. But what about the needs and desires of individual citizens? President Chang Min asked. How do you ensure everyone has a voice in decisions that affect their lives? Individual voices create chaos, Admiral Tae-hyun replied. Order requires hierarchy. The humans exchanged glances. Ambassador Sujin spoke carefully. We understand that approach works for you, but we have found that including everyone's perspective makes our decisions stronger and more stable. Would you be interested in cultural exchanges? We could learn from each other. Admiral Tae-hyun ended the meeting abruptly. These humans were either incredibly stupid or incredibly dangerous. They refused to acknowledge their obvious weakness. They kept asking questions instead of accepting reality. He reported back to Hegemony. Command, humans refuse standard integration protocols. They appear to be delusional about their position. Recommend immediate demonstration of force to restore rational thinking. The response was swift. Authorized. Proceed with standard conquest procedures. Meanwhile, on a psychiatric facility on Res, the Hegemony homeworld, Hyunwoo sat in his small room watching news broadcasts of the first contact meetings. His hands shook as he listened to the human responses. They were doing exactly what he had warned about in his reports. They were treating potential enemies as potential friends. They were offering cooperation and cultural exchange to beings who had arrived with weapons pointed at their planet. They don't understand, he whispered to his empty room. They're going to try to save us too. Hyunwoo had spent months trying to convince his doctors that his reports were accurate. They believed he was suffering from a psychological condition caused by prolonged exposure to alien thinking patterns. His warnings about human behavior were dismissed as delusions. Now he watched helplessly as Admiral Tae-hyun prepared to make the same mistake that had doomed dozens of other species. The Admiral would expect fear and surrender. Instead, he would encounter something the hegemony had never seen before. A species that responded to aggression with curiosity and offers of friendship. The conquest fleet moved into attack formation around Earth. Admiral Tae-hyun sent one final message to the human governments. You have 6 hours to surrender unconditionally. After that, we will demonstrate the consequences of defying the hegemony. Earth's response came from President Chang Min himself. We are sorry you feel violence is necessary. We will defend ourselves, but our offer of friendship remains open. When you are ready to talk as equals, we will be here. Admiral Tae-hyun was furious. Even facing complete destruction, these humans still acted like they had something to offer, instead of begging for mercy. Begin the attack, he ordered. What happened next would be remembered throughout the galaxy as the day everything changed. The humans did not fight the way anyone expected. They did not panic or run or beg for mercy. Instead, they did something that no species in hegemony history had ever done before. They fought back with one hand while extending friendship with the other, and somehow, impossibly, it worked. Hyunwoo watched the battle reports from his psychiatric ward and knew that everything he had predicted was coming true. The humans were not just defending themselves, they were about to change the galaxy forever. The hegemony conquest fleet attacked Earth expecting a quick victory. What they found instead was chaos that followed no military doctrine they had ever seen. Admiral Tae-hyun watched his tactical displays in growing confusion as the first wave of attacks began. Human defenses were primitive and should have been destroyed within minutes. Instead, something impossible was happening. The humans were learning. Engineer Jae-sung worked frantically in an underground bunker as hegemony energy weapons tore through Earth's atmosphere. When the first alien fighter crashed near his facility, instead of running away, he ran toward it. "Are you insane?" His colleague Min Jun shouted as Jae-sung began pulling apart the wreckage with his bare hands. "Look at this shielding technology," Jae-sung said, ignoring the battle raging overhead. "See how the energy flows through these crystals? I think I can adapt our generators to create the same effect." Within 3 hours, Jae-sung had built a working prototype of hegemony's shield technology using Earth materials and human engineering principles. Within 6 hours, every major human military base had the new shields installed. Admiral Tae-hyun stared at his reports in disbelief. How are they adapting our technology so quickly? But the shields were only the beginning. Pilot Min Jun climbed into his modified fighter aircraft just 18 hours after the invasion began. His plane now carried weapons reverse-engineered from hegemony wreckage and armor plating copied from alien hull designs. It should not have been possible to make such modifications so quickly. "Human engineering is different," Min Jun explained to his squadron over the radio. "We don't wait for perfect solutions. We make something that works, and improve it while we fight." The hegemony had never encountered an enemy that got stronger during battle instead of weaker. But the real surprise came from an unexpected source. Dr. Na Young sat in a communications center, not trying to coordinate military resistance, but attempting something far more dangerous. She was talking directly to individual hegemony soldiers. "My name is Na Young," she said into her radio transmitter, broadcasting on frequencies the humans had stolen from captured equipment. "I am a teacher, from Seoul. I want to understand why you are attacking us." The response came from a young hegemony fighter pilot named Keth Mar. "We attack because the High Command orders it. You will submit or be destroyed. This is the way of things." "But why do you personally want to hurt us?" Na Young asked. "We have never met before today. We have done nothing to harm you or your people." There was a long silence. Then Kethmar spoke again, his voice uncertain. It is not about want. It is about order. The hegemony provides stability through strength." "What if there was another way?" Na Young asked gently. "What if we could be friends instead of enemies? What if you could choose for yourself whether to fight or not?" This conversation was being heard by thousands of hegemony soldiers across the fleet. Many of them were from species that had been conquered generations ago. They had never been asked what they wanted. They had never been offered friendship by an enemy. The psychological impact was devastating. Commander Velthorn of the 3rd Assault. Wing found himself unable to give orders to destroy a human hospital ship that was broadcasting medical aid to wounded hegemony pilots. The humans were rescuing enemy soldiers and treating their injuries. "Sir," his weapons officer asked, "should we fire on the medical vessel?" Velthorn stared at his tactical display. The human ship was defenseless and clearly marked with medical symbols. It was also saving the lives of his own people. "No," he said quietly. "Do not fire." Similar scenes played out across the battlefield. Human rescue ships pulled hegemony survivors from damaged vessels. Human medics shared their supplies with alien wounded. Human engineers helped repair damaged hegemony equipment so that enemy soldiers could return safely to their ships. It was warfare unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Admiral Tae-hyun received report after report of his own forces refusing to attack human medical and rescue operations. 3 entire species within his fleet had declared they would no longer participate in offensive actions. "They are using psychological warfare," he told his staff. "They are confusing our troops with acts of false mercy." But his communications officer, a member of a species conquered 50 years ago, looked at him with new understanding. "Sir, what if the mercy is not false? What if they actually care about our lives?" The question hung in the air like a weapon more dangerous than any bomb. By the 3rd day of battle, Admiral Tae-hyun realized he was losing the war not through defeat, but through defection. Entire ships were refusing to fight. Some had even begun sharing supplies and technology with human forces. When human ships appeared in hegemony space, Tae-hyun expected them to be invasion fleets coming to destroy his homeworld in revenge. Instead, they were medical and supply, ships offering aid to struggling hegemony colonies. The final collapse came when Hyunwoo's classified reports were finally unsealed and distributed throughout the fleet. Soldiers read about humanity's true nature and realized they were not fighting monsters but potential friends who had been defending themselves. From his psychiatric ward, Hyunwoo watched news broadcasts of hegemony and human engineers working together to repair battle damage. He saw former enemies sharing meals and exchanging cultural information. His final transmission was broadcast across the entire galaxy. I tried to warn them. Humanity's greatest weapon is not their technology or their courage. It is their absolute refusal to accept that enemies must stay enemies forever. They turn every conflict into an opportunity for friendship. They make you want to be better than you are. Once that transformation begins, no empire can survive unchanged. The hegemony as we knew it is already over. The humans have won by making us want to win alongside them. The war was over. The transformation had begun. And across the galaxy, a new age of cooperation was about to dawn.